Good morning, Biblionauts and company. This is Greg, and if you're here, you've probably made some mistakes in your life that have led you through the rabbit hole that ended up in this failure in the Matrix. So let's talk about the best books of 2023. This is not the best books that have been published in 2023. I will probably make a video about that, although it will be much shorter since I don't read many new releases. And I normally get them secondhand through someone who recommends them to me because I don't want to get the risk. There is many other martyrs that do that for us, and whom you can trust when it comes to new releases. But I dedicate most of my year to classics and books that have been out for a while. So this is mainly gonna be that kind of book. And it's 30 with quite a few honorary mentions. For different reasons, I just wanted to acknowledge and explain why they are not in the list. But this is my 30 favorite books of the year. And every single book in this list is amazing. And if you happen to think otherwise, you are wrong. However, I will say that there's a couple that, you know, if they made it higher up into the list, it might have to do also a bit with the fact that, you know, like at the end of the day, this is like my favorite reads of 2023 rather than the objective favorite best books of 2023. They're all objectively good in my opinion, some better than others. If there is any book here that is not objectively good, which there might be, I will make sure to acknowledge that as I go through it and then explain why I consider it to be still worth it reading, which that can happen sometimes. I'm very vocal on my apology of philosophy. I'm a philosophy apologist, but that's not to say that I don't consider, like 2 books I read this year that I would not put anywhere near this list of favorites or best is Hegel and Kant, the Critique of Pure Reason and the Phenomenology of Spirit, which I will be probably repeating, and this time maybe sharing more in-depth thoughts about the Phenomenology, because there is other reasons to read this kind of book, but you won't see anything like that here. What's here, it's just, you know, la creme de la creme. So let's go to the honorary mentions, because this video is probably gonna be long. 30 books are too many. David Copperfield. I don't feel that Dickens respect me as a reader. I feel like, you know, it's like one of these grandpas that sit you down and kind of like talk down to you, trying to like explain everything to you, assuming that you're a child just because you don't have you're not dying as quick as they are. But so that's a problem that I have with David Copperfield. One of the problems that I have with Dickens is that everything is chewed up for you, and that doesn't allow you to get. It's like if everything is done for you, then why are you reading at all? Watch a movie, you know. That's my point. One of the best things about reading is that you have to do the work. You have to like unfold the story, and Dickens doesn't. There's nothing to unfold in Dickens' stories, as far as I have read so far. No one, please don't kill me yet. I will attempt 2 more books from Dickens before giving a final statement when it comes to this. But that has been my impression, and of course, a writer, as Annie Dillard says in one of the books that you will see in this list, a writer should only have so much faith on what they are writing, not too much. If you have too much, then you won't be able to get rid of the shit, of the stuff that is not too good. And Dickens he had a lot of faith in what he wrote. He liked it, but especially David Copperfield, because it's based on him. So that also makes it for a third, like the last third of the book, to be so tedious, so unnecessary. So, you know, like before it was enjoyable. The first 2 thirds were enjoyable. That's why it's still here. But the last third is just like, all right, yeah, whatever. So that's number whatever. What number? Yeah, number nothing, because this is honorary mentions. The next one is the Foundation Trilogy. Yeah, Asimov wrote well. It's a bit disappointed to read the Foundation Trilogy, because I feel like the first volume is the first book is very promising. It feels like you're about to start a quest, you know, psychohistory, the science of diving into the depths of the human mind and predicting the future forward. by understanding the nature of human societies. Um, it could have been, I think it was a very grand project that did not live up to its ambition. And I think that that is the case with Asimov quite often. So at the end of the day, it was a book that I enjoyed, but if it weren't for the fact that it's so relevant in terms of what he did for science fiction, as being a pioneering work, I would not even mention it. I would happily forget it. Then Tolstoy, A Confession. I have my things with Tolstoy. We are friends sometimes, then we hate each other. That happens. I guess, well, whatever. But A Confession, I put it here rather than in the list because it's biographical. It's like autobiographical to a degree, and you have to care about Tolstoy's life. And as well as he writes, he can also be irritating. I find him irritating. I don't know if that is the case for everyone else, but that is definitely the case for me. So that's why him talking about himself already on a stage of his life where he's starting to become more and more prophetic, which is like the part of Tolstoy that I hate is late Tolstoy. Doesn't work with me. However, you will find more Tolstoy in this list. Then you have Wordsworth, collected poetry. I found one Wordsworth poem that resonated with me that I really liked, and it's on a Poetry Thursday somewhere in the back catalog of this channel. But that was not in his collected poetry book. It was in a anthology biography, a biography anthology, which I have not included because I haven't finished it. I've been sort of like dipping in and out. But from the Folio Society, amazing. Folio Society, biography anthology, highly recommended. You've also had quite a few videos on this. So it's not in this list, but still, it would be one of the best books I've read this year. Autobiography anthology and autobiographical texts, extracts. And then Sappho. Sappho is Sappho. We only have fragments from her. I would not feel okay with putting her in the list. I also haven't gone through the book yet properly. I got a book, I think it's a Cambridge, this one. You have all the information you need in the cover there, so don't ask me. Sappho is it's like, you take probably someone who was a really good poet, and now you remove like 90% of its verses from what they wrote, and then you get something that has like some magic to it, but it's obviously like I don't understand people who talks about Sappho like being their favorite poet, like the best poet ever. Of course, it's like it cannot be because there's not enough of her, but it's very it's very evocating. Is that a word in English? Yeah, evocating. It evocates my own imagination and everything when I read her, and because of that, I still like her, but didn't make it into the list. However, very relevant as well because at the end of the day, any ancient writer in some degree or other is relevant, but not in the list. Now, number 30, I will put The Unbearable Lightness of Being. This is one of those books that it feels like it's a book like it's not great because it has many digressions that are unnecessary. Some of them are very funny, like when he tries to prove that the existence of God cannot be so because the existence of shit. Like if God has created us on his own image and we have God and we have to shit, that means that God has to shit as well. And now imagine God shitting. There's nothing divine about that. 90% of and then he goes into arguing that most of the scriptures have only tried, like the history of religion is just a history of religious people trying to deal with the fact that God shits and trying to prove to the world that God doesn't have a cat and doesn't have entrails and intestines. I found that funny, and there's many reflections like that in the book. The characters are a bit flat, in my opinion, especially the female characters. This is supposed to be, a nice novel that has some aspects of erotism and that is involved in its history. of I wanna say Czechoslovakia of the time, the Czechoslovakia of the time, pretty sure, not sure, but pretty sure. And all that is true, but also it's supposed to be presenting alternative forms of relationships, and a lot of people talks about it as, you know, like this is like the, if you wanna read a book about polyamory and shit. And at the end, it's one guy with two girls, which is the most normal thing in the world, and the relationships are pretty basic, and the characters, the female characters look like they were written by a man, sorry, and they shouldn't. So I did not love this book. However, I did enjoy it a lot. I do love good philosophical digression, and he has some. The story is still good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed reading it. It's definitely not one of my favorite books, but I still have to recommend it. I also think that as a writer, it's more enjoyable to read than as a reader, just because you see sort of like what he's doing. The kind of like is some parts are a bit disjointed, but yeah, I still here number 30. Then I'm gonna put We by Jeff Genney. I loved We. I loved especially the parts in which sort of like they talk about the infinite, and how sort of like infinity equals chaos, and I thought that was a reflection original from Borges, but I think it's gonna be from Jeff Genney. I don't remember the first name of the. I only wrote the title, so I don't remember the first name. But I mean, it's We. It's the dystopian novel that influenced every other. So you gotta read it only for that. But it's also enjoyable. It's easy to read, very readable, very fast. You can read that book in like an afternoon. So there you go. Then we have Other Minds by Peter Goffrey Smith. Other Minds is really. It could have been better, and there's a fail. There is one mistake with this book, and it's only that Peter Goffrey Smith is a philosopher of science, and as much as I do like talking about philosophy and the history of philosophy and reading about it, a book of 200 pages about octopuses that has a 30% of pages about the history of philosophy, or even more, digressions about Leibniz, for me, exposes, more than exposing any sort of philosophical richness of the idea of octopuses and their way of cognizing the world, that true alien entity in this planet, that cephalopods that have evolved independently from us. More than doing that, it exposes the fact that Peter Goffrey Smith is not a scientist, is not even a diver. Like, it's a diver, but not like a. It's not like he's been doing it for long enough. He has not. He doesn't know enough about octopuses, because if he knew enough, he would know that a 1,000-page book about octopuses would not be too much. And now you're using half of your pages to talk about Leibniz rather than about the fucking animal that the book is about. So, of course, that kind of alien cognition allows for philosophizing. But one thing is philosophizing and another thing is lecturing. And I feel like Peter Goffrey Smith was lecturing a little bit. And that's the reason why it's so far in the list. I myself have had relationships, and I'd say even friendships, with a couple of cephalopods. As I am a diver of pretty much every form of diving that there is. And because of that, I am very critical when it comes to books on and especially on sea creatures that can be encountered on less than 100 meters depth. So moving forward, we have Heart of Darkness. Good book, better movie. I know they are different. Any good adaptation is never gonna be the same as the book, because then why would you do it? Because people doesn't read? Well, they should. It's a good book. I enjoyed it, especially the last third of the book. I like books that get better rather than worse throughout. But knowing that Apocalypse Now exists, you don't really need to, like, of course you need, I mean, yeah, someone's gonna crucify me here. Read the book, is recommended, but Apocalypse Now is like, as is often the case, it's so much better. So much better than the book. Apocalypse Now is one of the best movies ever. So you should watch Apocalypse Now. You should watch the long version of Apocalypse Now, and then if you feel dissatisfied with what you got, if you feel like you want more, then read the book. That was Conrad. Did I say that? Yes. Then we have House of Leaves. Finally, one book that I have with me. I don't know if you remember, but I had lost this book, and then I found it again. But I lost it for a while. This is one of those cases that I promised to acknowledge that this is not a great book. This is not a very good book. This is in many ways a bad book, but it's an amazing experience. So this book is trying to be an experience, and let me explain why and how. This is trying to be an experience because there is pages like this. There's pages like that. So it's experimental. It's as experimental as, look at that. Look, what is that? Huh? This is a puzzle. This is many things that are not a book. And it's trying to be all of those things. And by trying to be all of those things, it has to give up some of the features and qualities of being a book. And because of that, this is a bad book. However, it's an amazing experience once again. It has some of the most haunting descriptions of fear of death and angst in the Heideggerian sense. There is a scene in which, like, well, there is a whole story, House of Leaves, from this guy. It's about, this couple that buys a house, this family that buys a house, and the house has a door that wasn't there before. And like the door just sort of like appears and changes position. And the guy is not only a journalist, I think, but also an explorer. So he goes through the door, and he discovers that on the other side of the door there is like a world that doesn't really have doesn't follow the laws of physics. Time expands, space expands, everything expands. Walls change, they rotate, everything, nothing is predictable in there. So the whole book is then trying to make sense of that room and going into it more and more and more. There is a scene in which one of the characters goes down a stairway, and they have a system to know how much space expands. And that system is someone throws a coin, and depending on how long the coin takes to fall, they know how much distance there is. So when the guy is on the other side after having climbed down the stairway, they throw the coin, and the coin takes like a whole day to fall or something like that. Basically, that means that the character is now trapped there and he will never be able to get back. And I felt like that was, maybe without trying or maybe trying, it was like one of the most visual descriptions of what death is. Like, just that sort of like being out in every single way, being left out. I don't know, this is a book that you read and you will remember. You will, like, if you go through the book, you will remember the book and you will think about it. But also, this guy was writing for people not yet born, and I always find that irritating. I feel like when someone is trying to write I feel like one of the biggest problems with our generation when it comes to writing is that they confuse complexity with quality. And this book is trying to be complex more than it's trying to be good. And that is because he's trying to appeal to readers of future generations rather than now. And all of that I find to be a mistake, and that is irritating, and that's why this book doesn't make it further forward. Also because in many parts it's academic, talking about Heidegger and all that shit, and it doesn't have to be, but it's part of the experience, and because of that I still have it here on this list, and number 25, something like that, yeah? No, number 27, I think, because there is 26. Okay, then is How to Kill a Mockingbird. I had a book, and I went to see the play as well, because that's why I got the book. I like the play more than I like the book. I don't feel like I don't know, I did everything on the same day, so it doesn't really go very far into my list. I'm also not completely sure if I fully read the book. I just remember not being very touched and I think it has to do with, there's many different kinds of readers, and the kind of reader that I am is a tyrant, which means that if I want to read a book in a day, I will. I sit down and I read it. But that doesn't mean that my capacity to focus is the same at the beginning that it was at the end. And I feel like because of that, I didn't really make justice to this book. In no moment was I reading and I thought this is a bad book. I thought it was a good book, and especially watching the play more than the book, I felt emotional. Like I actually, it awakened reactions on me, and that's why probably my lack of enjoyment of the book is telling more about my own mistakes when it came to approaching that book than the book itself, and that's why it's here. Then after To Kill a Mockingbird, I'm gonna put I'm gonna put the Odyssey by Homer, not because it wasn't a better book that should be further up in the list, but just because otherwise I'm gonna forget, because it's not on the list I forgot to put it, and it probably would be a bit further up, but also because the Odyssey is probably also gonna be in the list next year because I'm gonna reread it, and I want to. I don't want to give it twice a very high point in my list because it's a book that is one of these books that is more meant to be reread than it is meant to be read, and I have just started with it. I just have just started with Homer, so at this point, it's not like I've derived anything other than just a very moderate enjoyment from the book, but it's still been amazing. And of course, I mean, like I don't think I need to make an apology of the Odyssey or anything like that. So yeah, the Odyssey by Homer. And what are we? Oh, 20 minutes. 20 minutes. That's a lot. I don't know. I don't know that I want to make it. Should I make 2 videos? Okay, when we get to number 10, maybe I'll make a separate video for that. Okay, what's next? The complete poems of William Blake. William Blake is one of these poets that either I love or hate. It reminds me a lot of like sometimes like he's trying to be very deep and profound, and like trying to get into the dark depths of human nature. It's kind of like what a guy would tell you in the gym that they saw on a channel about stoicism, and because of that, sometimes it's hard for me to take serious William Blake. However, other times I do enjoy his poems a lot. He has some really good poems, and I mean, yeah, there is a lot to extract from those depths. So absolutely, yeah. I mean, William Blake still. I liked William Blake. I liked him more than I like him now, but I mean, I read his complete poem, so that says a lot. I could have read 3 poems, but I read the whole thing. What is next? Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake. Like all pop science books that I've read, they only they have very good ideas, but they are not very good writers, and that's the case with Merlin Sheldrake as well. However, the ideas in Entangled Life are amazing. Like the concept of like fungi, like their capacity to cognize the world, how they ruled the universe without really knowing. They are really at the top of the food chain, and we don't even know. They're inside us. They are at the beginning and at the end of life. When there's a volcano in an island that destroys everything, the first thing that you get in rocks is lichen. That's the first organic form of life that there is. Although yeah, is lichen organic? Yeah, I think so. And when the lichen falls off the rock, it gets soil. On that soil, humidity starts fermenting and the fungi emerges, and from that fungi, then plants and birds and other animals start going back into the island. So it's the beginning of life, and then when you die, of course, fungi assimilates your body. The biggest organism in the planet is fungi. The thoughts about the Wood Wide Web are amazing. For me, it was a discovery. I think I would have enjoyed it more if I hadn't had the pleasure or the burden or the whatever of hiking with a friend who was obsessed with the book before reading the book, which meant that the main value of the book was already a bit lost on me because I already knew most of the things that I was reading. because we hiked for several days, and he was talking about it all the time. But if you haven't read the book, I mean, it's one of these books that can be mind blowing. So that's Marlene Saldarik and Tango Life. Then we have Black Beauty. I don't know that by the time you see this video, you will already have seen my comment on Black Beauty. But if you have or you have not or whatever, it's a very beautiful children's book, and also the best non-fiction book that I have read this year is about Anna Sewell. It's a book written by the perspective of a horse. It began the animal rights movement in many ways. It shows you the London of the time. I loved Black Beauty. I think it's a really nice. Again, it was not really targeting only children because it was looking for change, I think, and for that you have to appeal to adults. But it has that sort of like cozy, childlike vibe that you can sort of like just read and enjoy and be like, oh, okay, I'm reading about a horse. You maybe watched the cartoon movie when you were a child. I did, and I didn't even know that there was a book about it, so it was a really nice surprise back in the bothy. What else? The Name of the Rose. This is another case of like a book that is really good. I could see its complexity. I could see its many Easter eggs about the medieval era, and like just things left there for people who's like obsessed with certain philosophers or with William of Ockham. Many things. I did a read along about this book. I made a mistake, which I made also last year. Last year I was hiking, and I brought J. Baker's Peregrine, and basically it was the same mistake. This time I was hiking, but on the desert, in Sahara Desert. And that means that, you know, when I'm out there in the world, it's really hard for me to fall inside the page because I'm kind of like living my own story, so it's harder for me to process other stories. And that's the only reason why this is not further up in the list. This is an amazing book, and I will definitely reread it. So the only reason why it's here, it speaks more about my own lack of more about me and my own situational context than... Is that redundant? I think the same situational context is very redundant. About my own context than anything else. Then you have Beowulf, a kind of similar situation as well. Like, I mean, Beowulf at the end of the day is just a really cool poem about a guy just killing a monster, and then the monster's mom, and then the dragon that appears 50 years after. It's nice. As a poem, it's amazing. It's one of my favorite. By now, it's one of my favorite long poems that I've ever read. And I enjoyed it a lot. And it's short and it's easy, but also it's the beginning of a whole literary mythology of you know, like a world where there were dragons and monsters, and then we kill them, and now they are not dragons and monsters, but many other things, many other books and movies that you have watched are influenced by the stories, the tales told in Beowulf. And Tolkien would be an example of that. The Hobbit is pretty much Beowulf. Like the story of the Hobbit is very, very similar to the story of Beowulf. But yeah, if you like Tolkien, if you like Tolkien, then I can say you must read Beowulf. Then 18 is Sex at Dawn by Christopher Ryan. I used to like his podcast, Tangentially Speaking. I also read his other book, Civilized to Death. The title is amazing. I thought his book both of his books are a little bit like the podcast. They are more like very... it doesn't feel like you're reading a book. It feels like you're listening to a guy on a podcast telling you things. However, Sex at Dawn is amazing. It's a history of sexuality. It's a history of human sexuality, and relating it to bonobos, rather than chimpanzees, and what the implications of that is about talking about how sexual we are as animals, and why the fuck are we not do we not behave in that way? Why? And also wondering about why our culture, like basically, in some ways, human cultures is like in religion, especially, is a history of us trying to repress our sexual impulses, and there is no reason for that. And the book argues for that. The book is telling you are a monkey, and you should be, uh, you know, and because of all of that, I agree with the book. I just would like, the only reason why I'm critical with this book is because it's a kind of book I would like to write myself at some point. So everything that I saw there that wasn't what I was looking for, obviously is gonna I'm gonna be more critical with it because I like it so much. But I'm not a big fan of Christopher Ryan at this point. I actually even dislike him a little bit. But the book is still highly recommended. One of the best books on polyamory and on alternative forms of human relationships that I have read. So there you go. And it's fun to read. The book is fun to read, and it's fast to read as well because it's not written with that sort of like complexity that literature sometimes has. It feels more like it's a guy talking to you. Yeah, I mean, definitely read it. There's anthropology, there's biology, there's a bit of everything. What else? SPQR. SPQR by Mary Baird was the first, I think the first one volume big history of Rome that I've read, and it was really cool. It's the best written one that I know of, and I read it because I think Steve Donoghue did a read along. He did a read along, and I was so following the read along and reading the book at the same time. And that was at the very beginning of me watching his channel, and yeah, I enjoyed the book. I got a bit lost because I hadn't read a lot about it before, and I also read it in a very short period of time and joined it with another book, which was a recommendation from Michael K. Vaughan, which was the next book in this list, which is Egypt, Greece, and Rome by Charles Freeman. If you wanted to have like a really nice open perspective on the three empires like Greece, Egypt, and Rome, Charles Freeman's book is amazing. That book I want to reread because I feel like it's a really nice way to also later kind of choose your niche if you have such a thing. What else? History of Sexuality by Michel Foucault is supposed to be an introduction of a multi-volume thing that he never did. It has all the things that you would not that any introduction should not have, and it lacks the things that introduction should have. It's not easy to read. It's not welcoming or anything like that, but it has amazing reflections. It's philosophy. Foucault is like, in terms of the ideas that he presents, is so rich. Is packed. Foucault is always packed, and is for me one of the philosophers that I enjoy reading the most. So I have to put it here. Because it's also a short book as well. It's crazy how much he can pack in such a short book. And Foucault cannot leave you indifferent. You might dislike him, but you will not be left indifferent with Foucault, ever. Then Neuromancer, another book that I do have. Look, I also had a History of Sexuality. Neuromancer, here we are. Neuromancer. What to say about Neuromancer? Sci-fi. You probably have seen my recommendation of this already, my video posted at some point, and it is the beginning of cyberpunk. Began the movement. It's a story of a heist between a guy, like a cowboy kind of guy, and a samurai girl, and it's a lot of other things as well. It talks about like sort of like, there's an AI on the background that's trying to make them do this heist so that it can gain agency, freedom, with all the implications that giving that to an AI can have in a world like this. I enjoy this book a lot. It's a bit confusing to read. That's why it's here, because I feel like probably on a reread this book would be much more enjoyable. But yeah, Neuromancer, William Gibson. Gibson is a big name and it won all the prizes in its time. So there you go, recommended. And that was number 13 already. So I'll talk about two more and we'll leave it there. Number 12 is The Complete Poems of Emily Bronte. I talked about William Blake, always giving me like, I like it, I hate it, I like it, I hate it, or I laugh at you. But with Emily Bronte, it's just like, I like everything. I just like everything Emily Bronte wrote, everything. So it's there. There was no poem that I didn't like in that book, and every single poem I liked. Some I liked a lot. Some made it into my poetry canon, but others I just liked. But this is just solid book. Much better. There was a moment in the past where I thought that Emily Dickinson and Emily Bronte were the same person. And I'm glad they are not, because I do not like Emily Dickinson's poetry. I also confronted Emily Dickinson's full poetry this year, and it was one of the worst things that I read. I did not like her full thing. I got the book because I had read a couple of her poems and I loved them, but then I realized after reading the whole book that I only liked a couple of poems from her, and were those that I didn't even need to open the book for. So that's it. What's number 11? Oh, we finished with Tolstoy, and with the death of this video is The Death of Ivan Illich by Tolstoy again. The Death of Ivan Illich. I don't know how you pronounce it, but I think Russians would pronounce it Illich. But yeah, I mean, this book is certainly a book. It's Tolstoy again, late Tolstoy, not late enough. It's early enough that it can make it into a list. It's a good book. I enjoyed it. It's about a guy on the deathbed, dying, and also realizing that he wasted every single minute of his life, and he made the wrong decisions. It's starting to have this prophetic teaching kind of attitude that Tolstoy developed more in his life, probably because he was surrounded by people who needed that kind of talking down into. But I don't. I enjoy the book because I enjoy Tolstoy writing. He's an amazing writer, but the more moralistic aspect of the book, the more didactic aspect of the book is lost on me. I don't know anyone who uses his or her life to its fullest more than I do. I don't waste a minute, and I'm not planning to waste a minute in my life. So when I read a book about someone regretting, I'm not like, oh my god, this is so mind-changing. Now I need to take the helm of my life and go in the direction in which I really want to go. I already do that. So when Tolstoy is trying to give me a life teaching, I'm always like, sure, man, yeah, I learned that when I was 17. So because of that, I find Tolstoy sometimes a bit irritating, but still, Tolstoy is an amazing book. It has amazing. The description of how this person is dying is very, very real. It feels very, very real, and because of that, it's heavy to read. And it's Tolstoy again. I mean, it's fucking Tolstoy, the guy, the writer. So there you go. That's number 11, and now we are left with the 10 best books of 2023. The 10 best books that I read on 2023 that I will record right after this, but I'll put in a different video because this is already gonna be almost 40 minutes. I kind of want to wait to the minute 40, but I think I'm going to leave it here because there is no reason for me to keep talking to you. So I'll leave it on minute 39.5 seconds. Okay. Thank you if you've got to this point of the video. Let me know. And tell me which of these books did you agree or disagree with me, if there is any book that I didn't mention but that I read. Ask me and question me, why did you not, fucking motherfucker, put that book into your top. And yeah, I'll see you on the other side. Thank you, Booktube.